frame of the composting toilet will take less than 2 2x4s. When you buy these from the big box stores, make sure that you buy them a few weeks ahead of time and let them dry out in your garage or outside if it's not wet and rainy. There's a lot of moisture in these things and you want them to dry as much as possible before you cut them. That will reduce any twisting that might occur after you cut them down to size. So right now we're going to start cutting these to make that frame. Once you've cut 1 2x4 down into 1.5 by 1.5 inch square pieces, then you're going to have an 8 foot by 1.5 inch square piece that you need to cut into lengths to make the frame. You'll need 1 full 2x4 cut like this, and then you're going to need a small piece of the other 2x4 for the top, front, and back. You'll see that in the plans. And when you're done, you're going to have a piece that's left over that's a little more than 14 inches long that you don't need for this project. But in case you made a mistake, you have a piece here that you probably could use. Off the second 2x4, you're only going to need 2 pieces for the top, front, and rear of the toilet. So I added those 2 up, and I'm cutting it a little bit larger than that so that I can easily handle this on the saw and cut them down to specifically the length we need. It just makes things a lot easier and a lot safer. Now these are the pieces, all 4 of these. We've got the top, front, and back, and we've got the bottom, front, and back. It's important that all 4 of these be precisely the same length. So we're cutting them precisely the same length all together at the same time. So by cutting these all the same length at the same time, then we're going to be sure that the toilet is square. And when you're done cutting, you'll end up with a 6 foot piece of 2x4 left over from those 2 pieces. Those are the 12 pieces that will make up the frame for the toilet. But then you're also going to need some thin plywood. This is 5mm plywood. I had this left from the vanbuild. And you'll also need some smaller pieces for the rail where the urine collection container slides back and forth. All the info is, of course, in the instructions. Before you start assembling, you should build yourself a little jig like this. It's very simple. It's just 2 pieces of 2x4. You don't want it too big because you want it to fit inside the frame when you're done in order to line things up. So what we're doing here with that is we're taking the top rail and one of the side pieces, and we want the side piece to be flush right here. So match that up and we put our clamp on. And we put the other clamp on. Now, we didn't put the clamps on real tight yet. Make sure that's flush and tighten it down. So now this is flush. Now we're going to make this top rail flush and put 2 clamps over here. The reason for doing this is we want this to remain flush if we put it together with a little bit of precision, we'll have less sanding to do. So next, I'm going to drill a hole right through the center here with about an 1/8 inch drill bit. So I'm going to drill right through, right in the center. You want to drill and get all that wood material out. So now we have a nice pilot hole for our screw. See how far that's going to go in? Well, our screw is going to go a little bit further. When you're doing this, I recommend you use drywall screws, and you want the coarse thread, not the fine thread. So we don't want this. We do want this coarse thread drywall screw. This drywall screw is going to go in here. It's going to go a little bit past where we drilled. The pilot hole will keep it going in straight, and it'll keep these flush with each other. Okay, let's take a look at the first two joints. This is the top, and these are the two sides. When you take a look at this, you see this piece of wood goes all the way across, and any weight pushing down on this is going to be transferred to the floor through these two side pieces. The bottom piece here is this piece. This piece is going to go in here, and we're going to screw it together. Two screws go in this way. You can't confuse the bottom with the top, because the bottom spans all the way across these two. It's going to be extremely strong. If you did this backwards, when you assemble it, this would not be as strong. When it's screwed and glued together, it's going to be very strong, but not as strong as you do it the proper way. So I'm going to screw this together, and then I'll make the other side, and in just a moment I'll be right back. So when you got those first two joints done, next you need to do the bottom joint. So when you're going to put this bottom piece on here, you need this little jig that you made to fit on the inside, so that you can clamp that down and match it up and get it nice and flush. We've got our sides done, so now we're going to start assembling the center portion, and this is the wide piece that goes on the top. So you need to make sure that you've got the side frame with the top, that piece that goes all the way across on the bottom. And now you're going to use your little jig that you created. You're going to put that in here, and you're going to make sure that this is nice and flush, and you're going to clamp it. Put at least one clamp on each side. Make sure it's flush, tighten things down. Now, you see we have this much width, so now we can put in two screws to hold this piece in. So I'm going to mark right where I want these screws and drill my pilot holes. Need to remember there's a screw right here. So I started to drill my hole right where that screw is going to be, so I needed to move it over, because there's a screw that goes in here and holds these pieces together. So those are two good spots. And then we're going to do the other side. Get the other side and put it on here. Remember, it's got to be the piece that goes the full length. That's going to go in here. And then once again, just clamp it down. I actually ran out of the drywall screws, so I switched to decking screws. These are also 3 inches long. And with this last piece that's in here, I actually had to cut my little jig down a little bit so that it would fit in here, because I want to make sure I get this nice and flush. Now, the last two pieces have to go in right there. One there, and then of course one back here. So far, so good. There we go, nice and flush. And that completes the basic frame for the toilet. So next, we're going to put the rails together and the bottom. Next thing you have to do is get the rails ready. So to do that, you just have to put the two pieces together. So first, put a little glue on there. And then if you add a little seasoning, that is, if you put a little salt on it, that'll stop it from slipping around when you put the two pieces together. And that way, it grips a little bit so you can get it nice and flush when you put your little clamps on. And the clamps that I'm going to use are just these binder clips. Get it lined up. And then you wait until tomorrow and let those things dry up. So then you got your bottom piece cut to size, but in order to get that bottom to fit in, we're going to have to cut the corners out. So if you take your scrap piece you had left over and just put it in the corner, flush it up with both sides, and then just trace it, that's the piece you need to cut out. Do that on all four corners. All right, then you need to cut those out either on the table saw or the jigsaw. Either works. When you cut those little pieces out, this is a completed piece. When you cut those out, you might want to put them at the back as a stop for the bucket. I did that here on ours. But the reality is, we really don't need a stop for the bucket because it's in our shower and the bucket can't move any further back. So you might want to keep those scrap pieces if you think your application might need that bucket from moving any further back. Before disassembling the entire frame so that it can be glued together, you want to fit the toilet seat on, and you want to fit every possible piece just where you want it so that when you disassemble it, it'll be really easy to put back together, glued and screwed. So I'm making a spot right there for the screws, and I'm going to put a little countersink hole. And I got a drywall screw with some washers on it, using what I had. Had to double up the washers because of their sizes. And you see, that fits perfectly. And the front provides lots of support on the sides. Oh, you can even have a seat, test it out, make sure it's comfortable. And I think it'll work. So the last thing you have to do is prepare the 5-gallon bucket. So you've got yourself a nice 5-gallon bucket here, and all you're going to do is cut off the top ring. And it's very easy to do that with a jigsaw, just like I've done to this one here. So you're going to cut off that top ring, and now you've got your bucket. It will fit in the toilet at this point. And also cut out a little section here so that the urine collection piece can slide in and out in case you need to get it a little bit closer. Then the last thing to do is get yourself a dry bag. Put the dry bag into the bucket. Now this dry bag protects you from any leaks from the garbage bag that you're going to put in here. And it also protects the garbage bag from the sharp edges of the plastic 5-gallon bucket. Then you simply put in some mulch or composting material to collect any moisture. Insert this into your new e-toilet, and you're done.